Is Europe about to witness its greatest political upheaval in a century? In Budapest, Viktor Orbán stands before a crowd of allies from around the world, declaring Hungary the front line in a battle for the continent's soul. He recalls celebrating Donald Trump's victory, a moment Orbán says marked the turning of the tide. Since then, he claims, woke ideology and gender propaganda have been pushed back. Christian identity is once again at the heart of civilization, and common sense has returned to power in countries from Hungary to Argentina. Orbán welcomes global conservative leaders, figures like Javier Milei and Andrzej Babis, praising their victories over progressive forces and urging Poland to join the surge. Orbán frames the upcoming Hungarian election as nothing less than a civilizational showdown. If his conservative coalition falls, progressive power in Brussels could become unstoppable, shaping Europe's laws, borders, and values for decades to come. So is this the dawn of a new conservative era, or the final stand before progressive dominance is locked in? Let's rewind. How did Hungary and its allies become the linchpin of this continental struggle? How did a small Central European nation become the rallying point for a global movement? To answer that, we need to look back to 2016, when Donald Trump's surprise victory in the US sent shockwaves through the political world. Suddenly, nationalist and conservative forces found new energy, not just in America, but across Europe and even Latin America. Viktor Orbán, Hungary's prime minister, was quick to recognize this shift. He positioned Hungary, a country of less than 10 million, as a key player in what he calls a battle for Western civilization. In his recent speech, Orbán celebrated conservative wins far beyond Hungary's borders. In Argentina and Chile, the right has gained ground. In Europe, Czech leader Andrzej Babis ousted a progressive coalition, a move Orbán describes with pride. In Poland, the Law and Justice Party prevails, and in Georgia, Prime Minister Irakli Garibashvili stands firm against pressure from both Russia and the European Union. Even in Germany, where Orbán says, "It's not easy to be a patriot these days," he welcomes leaders like Alice Weidel of the AfD into the fold. Hungary isn't just building friendships, it's forging strategic alliances. Under Orbán, Hungary has deepened ties with the US, signing deals on energy, visas, and investment. The uniting thread? A shared resistance to progressive agendas, skepticism of mass migration, opposition to sweeping green policies, and a defense of national sovereignty. But here's the risk. This movement's strength lies in its unity. Without close cooperation, Orbán warns, conservative momentum could fragment and stall. Understanding how these alliances work, and where they might falter, is crucial for anyone concerned about Europe's future. But as this transnational coalition gains strength, what obstacles threaten their vision for the continent? Behind the victories, a war of attrition is raging across Europe's institutions. Viktor Orbán isn't just celebrating past wins, he's sounding the alarm over an ongoing battle that cuts to the heart of European politics. For Orbán and his allies, the conflict pits a rising conservative nationalist bloc against what he calls the entrenched progressive powers of Brussels. He paints a picture of Hungary under siege, squeezed from the west by the bureaucrats of the European Union, and from the east by pressure over the war in Ukraine. According to Orbán, Brussels isn't just meddling in Hungary's affairs, they're actively working to silence dissent, interfere in elections, and impose their will on sovereign nations. He accuses the EU of using so-called values as a pretext for censorship, stifling conservative voices that challenge the mainstream agenda. One of Orbán's core grievances is migration. He points to Hungary's decision to close its borders years ago as the first domino in a broader movement, and credits conservative leaders like Geert Wilders in the Netherlands for standing strong against open borders, even in isolation. Orbán claims Brussels prioritizes migrants over European citizens, ignoring the cultural anxieties and security concerns of everyday people. But the conflict doesn't stop there. He warns that Europe's new green policies, driven by the progressive core, are backfiring, causing industrial collapse, rising unemployment, and energy crises that hit working families hardest. Instead of protecting citizens, Orbán argues, the EU is forcing costly reforms that threaten Europe's economic future. And then there's Ukraine. Orbán alleges that Brussels is sacrificing European interests for the sake of endless support to Kyiv, pouring resources into a conflict while neglecting the basic needs of its own people. In his view, Hungary is surrounded, fighting not just for its own survival, but for the right of all European nations to decide their destinies without interference. At stake, Orbán claims, is nothing less than Europe's sovereignty, prosperity, and democratic foundations. If conservative voices are suppressed and the current trajectory continues, he warns that Europe risks sliding into economic hardship, political decay, and a loss of national identity. So what if this anti-Brussels coalition manages to consolidate power? What kind of future is Orbán really promising for Hungary and for Europe itself? Standing at a crossroads, Europe's next chapter will be written at the ballot box. Orbán's message is clear. This isn't just another election. It's the front line of a continent-wide struggle. He envisions a future where Hungary isn't just a small nation charting its own course, but the epicenter of a conservative resurgence that could transform all of Europe. As he sees it, the old certainties are crumbling. Years ago, conservatives believed their emphasis on national sovereignty set them apart, made international cooperation nearly impossible, like trying to build a railway from wood and iron that simply wouldn't run. But that's changed. Now, Orbán argues, only a transnational conservative alliance can push back against progressive globalists who, in his words, have dug in deep, from Brussels to the major capitals of Western Europe, even drawing strength from allies in America. He predicts nothing less than the biggest political realignment in a century. If Hungary holds the line, Orbán claims, it could inspire a wave of patriotic, national-minded governments remaking Western institutions, fulfilling plans hatched years ago by conservatives across the Atlantic. But if Hungary falls, he warns, it would be a major blow, emboldening progressives and consolidating control in Brussels. At stake is more than policy. It's about who gets to decide, bureaucrats far from home or ordinary citizens in their own countries. The outcome, Orbán says, will set a precedent for how Europe is governed. Will grassroots democracy reclaim center stage, or will supranational authority tighten its grip? For civil society and international order, the consequences are profound. Economic priorities, cultural norms, and the very idea of national self-determination hang in the balance. This is, in Orbán's words, a battle for the soul of the world. A struggle waged not only in parliaments, but in universities, academies, and the day-to-day life of every European. If this really is a battle for Europe's soul, what lessons can we take from these struggles, no matter where we stand on the political spectrum? What can citizens and leaders alike learn from Hungary's campaign for sovereignty? Orbán's message is clear. Trust the instincts of your own people. Quoting Margaret Thatcher, he insists that true conservatives put their nation first, answering only to their voters, not distant bureaucrats. For years, nationalism was seen as a force that divided Europe. Now, Orbán argues, it's the foundation for a new kind of international collaboration, one driven by nations asserting their own interests and values, standing together without losing their unique identities. But this shift comes with real challenges. Democracy and sovereignty aren't self-sustaining. They demand constant vigilance and strong political organization. Orbán warns that entrenched progressive forces in Brussels, backed by NGOs, censorship networks, and foreign funding, are actively working to sway national elections and stifle dissent. In his view, complacency is dangerous. If citizens don't engage, if they fail to recognize who truly holds the levers of power, they risk losing not just their economic security, but their voice in shaping their country's future. At the same time, building coalitions across borders is no easy feat. Aligning diverse national interests under a common conservative vision means navigating deep cultural and political differences. The rewards could be historic, a genuine counterweight to progressive dominance in Europe. But the risks are just as great. Missteps could fracture the movement, or worse, leave publics powerless as history's tide shifts. So the lesson is stark. Political destiny favors those who organize, who defend their culture, and who are prepared to act. And Orbán's closing challenge hangs in the air. Will you watch history unfold, or will you shape it? The fight for Europe's soul is underway. Which side of history will you stand on? Viktor Orbán's message is clear. This is more than just another election, more than Hungary's internal drama. Right now, he's casting his country as the main battleground in a much bigger struggle, a struggle that could shape the entire future of Europe. According to Orbán, Brussels isn't a neutral referee, but an active player, intervening in national elections and supporting progressive federalist forces with money and influence. The stakes, he insists, are higher than ever. This isn't just about who governs Hungary. It's about whether national sovereignty, economic independence, and traditional cultural values can survive the combined pressures from both Brussels in the west and Kyiv in the east. For Orbán, Hungary's resilience isn't just about domestic policy. It's about standing as the strongest conservative stronghold in the European Union for 16 years. And he's blunt about the consequences. If that stronghold falls, it would be a major victory for progressives, making it far easier for their vision to sweep across the continent. That's why Orbán frames the upcoming Hungarian election as a turning point, not only for his own people, but for every European who cares about who actually gets to decide their future, distant bureaucrats or the nations themselves. But the real question is, can one country, even with allies, tip the balance of an entire continent? Orbán's vision of a transnational conservative movement, energized by victories abroad and resistance at home, may inspire some, but it also raises tough questions. Is this a genuine grassroots surge, or are we watching power dynamics shift simply from one elite to another? Can this coalition truly deliver on promises of greater prosperity, more autonomy, and the protection of cultural identity, or will new divisions just deepen old wounds? For viewers like you, this isn't just a spectator sport. The direction Europe takes will influence your economic prospects, how much say you have in your country's future, and what kind of society you'll leave for the next generation. Will you be content to watch these battles from the sidelines, or will you get informed, get engaged, and help shape the outcome? Because in Orbán's framing, and perhaps in reality, the decisions made now will echo for decades. The crossroads is here. The soul of Europe hangs in the balance. Which vision will win? And what role will you play in deciding that future?